So now that the election's over, I can freely talk about leaders and what's wrong with our leaders. But I'm going to be talking about fly fishing leaders, not those other ones. Everything you know is wrong about leaders. I teach this stuff all the time, and I know when the words are coming out of my mouth, I am not telling the truth. So the first thing we teach about leaders is it all has to do with hook size. And all this is based on is dry fly fishing. And it all comes from way back. And first of all, let's talk about the point of a leader. Basically, the leader goes on the end of your fly line. If you have ever tried to cast with your fly line without a leader on the end, you'll find that your line will snap and it'll just like crash into the ground, do all kinds of weird stuff. What the point of the leader is to basically continue your fly line, start the same stiffness, notice I didn't say thickness, same stiffness as the end of your fly line to something smaller at the end. It's to distribute the power evenly down to the end of the fly or into your fly line. So it's all about transferring the power from the end of your fly line. All leaders, when you buy like pre-made leaders, all have about the same thickness at the end, the same stiffness at the end. There's actually a thickness, but it correlates directly with stiffness. So it's about the same stiffness as your fly line. And then it tapers and gets smaller and smaller, or if you build your own, you use smaller and smaller line. Okay, that's the easy part. This part right against your fly line is the easy part. Now the rest of it gets a little trickier. I teach a thing, and in any fly tying book or class, you're going to learn the rule of 3. And it basically says your hook size divided by 3 is equal to your leader size. Should be the end of your leader, your tippet, okay? And when you buy a leader and it says 4X leader, you're not talking about the thick part of the leader, you're talking about the very end, the tip. So supposedly when you have a size 2, 3, you never have a 3 hook, 2 or 4 hook, you should be using 1X leader, 5, 6, 7, 2X, 8, 9, 10, so an 8 hook or a 10 hook, 3X leader, 12X hook, 4X leader, and a 14 or 16, a 2X leader, okay? That's pretty much standard if you're doing dry fly fishing. Now the problem comes with all of the different ways that we fish nowadays. And I'm a trout fisherman, but I fish a lot of bass. So I'm using all kinds of crazy stuff most of the time. And let's talk about what happens with the leader. Again, we're talking this rule of 3 pertains to a dry fly, an almost weightless fly, okay? But all of a sudden, we're talking about streamers and nymphs and chuck and duck for steelhead and all kinds of crazy stuff. And what do we do at that point? So let's take a look at some flies here I got. These 2 flies, for instance, are both on number 10 hooks. But this one weighs a ton more. So if I put this on maybe a 3X or even a 4X, if I put this on a 4X tippet and I go to cast, it'll probably whack me in the back of the head. It's just gonna collapse in the air. So even though it's a small hook, I'm gonna have to use a heavier leader or a less tapered leader, basically. A stiffer leader to sort of hold it up in the air enough to when it comes down, it's just, it's gonna go into the water. It's gonna turn it over. If the leader's too thin, it's just gonna fall apart. I see people all the time with nymph rigs, and they've got a very, very small nymph, but they have a big old, like, a couple split shots on it, and they're doing it on 4X tippet, and it's just going to collapse. So you really have to think about not only the size of the fly, but the sort of weight of the fly and what you're trying to accomplish. With a dry fly, you're just trying to gently let it land on the surface of the water. With a streamer, you don't really care about how gently it lands. In fact, you want it to fire into the water so it'll get down as deep as it can possibly get. So in this case, I would probably use something like a 1X tippet. And with this one, I would use maybe a 3X or 4X tippet. Same thing on these two flies. Now here's this fly is on the surface, and then this is a tiny little nymph. They're both the same size hook. Now what do I do in that case? Well, the dry fly I want to land on top. I think it's tied on a 12 or a 10. I think it's a 10. So if I look on this chart, it's going to be 10 divided by 3 is about 3. So it's going to be a 3X tippet. Okay? And that'll probably turn it over nice and gently enough to land on the surface. The nymph, on the other hand, I'm using this to catch a steelhead. So a 3X tippet might be a little bit light on the steelhead catching world. So I may up this one to a higher size just for the tensile strength of the leader, because my presentation's not that delicate. Okay, so it's not important that it rolls over gently. It's not going to collapse from the weight. So I'm thinking of using this fly in terms of the fish I'm going to try to catch. Whereas this one, I'm thinking more about how its presentation is. See, so you're changing your mind based on the kind of leaders you're going to have. Same thing with like streamer type things. This one, they're both tied on, I don't know what this is, like a number 2 hook or something. And they're both streamers. This one's got tiny, tiny little bead eyes and is meant to swim just under the surface, while this one has big old lead eyes and it weighs about a ton. And if I cast this with a light leader, it would just bang around. It would be all over the place. So again, I'm going to want to use a heavier leader with this fly and a lighter leader with this fly. Okay? And so I'm thinking of a couple different things when I'm thinking about leaders. I'm thinking about, 1, will it turn over the fly? 2, how heavy is the fly and how thick of a leader am I going to need to turn it over? 3, I'm going to think about presentation. Does it need to land gently? Or is it okay if it just goes whack and then just gets underwater and then you're going to drift it across the stream? So at that point, the delivery part doesn't matter at all. And 4, I'm going to think about, or I don't know, maybe 5, I don't know where I am at this point. The next one is, how big of a fish am I trying to catch? Is it going to be a big fish or a little fish? So there's a bunch of different things that you have to consider when you're thinking about putting leaders together. So when we look at these leaders, again, when we look at them, I'm going to open this one up. The part that connects to this is a 9-foot 4X, and the thick part that connects to, if I can see it, the part that connects to your fly line is typically very thick and very stiff. And the idea here is this is approximately, especially when you bend it over, it's approximately the same flexibility as your fly line. So about half of your fly line, or at least the first third of it, is pretty stiff. The idea is that it's gradually moving from that thick fly line to something thinner. And then it's the last 2/3 that start to determine all this other stuff about flipping the fly over. Okay, so that's one of the things when you're considering your leaders. There's a bunch of other tricks. I think I have a video about Mike's leader trick, and it's where I primarily just use a 3x leader, and then I adjust the either take away stuff or add more tippet to the end of it to control what exactly I'm doing. Okay, so that's my take on leaders. Okay, and I hope those leaders will do better than most any other leaders we have. All right, we'll see you. Bye.